Hi, and welcome to this episode of Filmi Ladies. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. We're calling this episode New Year, New You, because in this episode, we're basically going to talk about movie stars who played against type. So we all have our favorite movie stars and we like them to play the same thing over and over again. I am certainly very guilty of that because I basically just want Shah Rukh Khan to romance people for 3 hours and I get upset when he does movies like Zero. So I'm certainly very guilty of it. But sometimes we'll have a star who'll do a movie that we're like, why would someone cast you in that? And then they do a phenomenal job. And then sometimes the experiment fails, but at least we appreciate the fact that they tried. So this episode is going to focus on stars who did something different than what we usually imagine, and we'll speak about those movies. Beth, I know that you had some thoughts on the concepts of like performing against type, and I know that you kind of like asked the Twitter mind what they thought about it. So how do you feel about this?
Well, first, I want to thank everyone on Twitter who responded, and that includes Varun Grover, friend and screenwriter. And when he responds to something, a million other people see it and then they respond. So thank you, Varun, for helping us with this. And we'll get to his choices and some others later. But reading all these things that people submitted about, good examples of people playing against type really made me think about what we mean when we say that. So I wanted to kind of start with going through some of that. And the first thing is, to play against type, you have to have a type.
Right.
So if it's very early in your career, I don't think that counts. Okay. And when we're talking about Hindi cinema stars, very early in your career can mean a bunch of different things. So several people submitted Badlapur for Varun Dhawan, but I'm like, he had only done 3 films at that point. I don't think he had a type yet. And also all 3 of those films are not exactly identical to each other. So no, that does not count for me. But you can also think about when you look back at someone's entire career and you see anomalies or different choices. We kind of use playing against type to cover that too, even though at the time the film released, it may not have been the case. So again, a few people submitted like Maya Memsab for Shah Rukh. I'm like, he didn't have a type yet. That's way too early in his career. So again, retrospectively, yes, maybe, but not at the time. So I think that's when we look back, it's really hard to remember what had actually happened only up until that point. So anyway, so that's kind of an interesting thing. And that also, I think, brought me to 2 other points, one of which is you can talk about the role, but you can also talk about the type of film. And I think that's really interesting too, especially in any kind of mainstream popular cinema where you're really dealing with formula in some way or other. And this is not a critique. I like a lot of formulaic films. That's just a thing too. So you can talk about the role or the whole project or the vibe or whatever. One of my goals for 2023 is to say the word vibe less. I'm not off to a good start.
Oh, we say vibe multiple times a day in California.
I was gonna say, you live in California, I live in Illinois.
Cool.
Totally
like we
different.
Have to say it. And when you see vibe, you have to look off in the distance and do this, like vibe.
Is that the vibe? You also have the question of against type and then not to the same type. And those 2 things are different, right? So you can play a role that's different from what you usually play, but that's not against. Against is contrast in a very strong way, in an opposing way, right? So I think we can get into that too, which is also interesting. All right, 2 more things. Despite the fact that I love thinking about—
I love how this is like a dissertation, Beth.
No, it's numbered points and everything. This is what I do with my time off. I love thinking about women in films, and I know you do too. I found it a lot harder to think about women in this concept than I do men. And I suspect that's because heroines are often a little more bland than heroes. And so again, to play against something, you have to have something to play against. So some of the women that I might bring up are more just— it's different than what they usually do. It's not necessarily against, but some people on Twitter gave me some women that I thought were actually against, and that was really interesting to think about. And then my last point is aging heroes are a really interesting way into this, because it is, for some of these men, only when they began to get too old for typical romance or action. And that varies depending on the genre or the era and the specific person, right? I could name a lot of heroes who still haven't gone against type much because they are staying in their lane. And that's not just them, it's like the people around them who cast them and producers and all that kind of stuff too. But like sometimes when we get aging heroes, then we really get against type. And I have one specific example I want to talk with about that. But I think that aging heroes can really lead to some great creative casting and role selection. And I'm glad for those. So let me talk about one of mine under that category to start with. And this came up from a bunch of people on Twitter too, but I did actually think of this one myself before I asked Twitter. This was one of my favorite performances of this person ever, and certainly of the year the film came out. Rishi Kapoor in Agnipath. Oh my God, I loved him in that film. I remember feeling like I was watching some kind of Shakespearean production. He was so evil and so like, there was just so much going on in that. And I know that he's not even the main villain for that film, which is also kind of astounding, but I just remember being completely blown away by that. And yes, when that film came out, he was already, we all know that he did aging romantic hero a lot later than he should have.
Right.
But even with that in mind, he had already gone past that by the time this film came out. But this was just such an amazing performance. And it was one of those performances that made me think, if he could do that, what else could he have done if producers came to him with more interesting roles, or if he had taken what, I don't know. And we talk a lot about, what do people actually choose from what they're offered? And his son, I feel like, has done a good job of choosing interesting things from within what he's offered. It made me wish that Rishi had done even more. Am I an expert on his filmography? No, I am not, but it makes me want to dig into more of this sort of like later in life stuff and see what all he did. And this one I feel like is really against type. It's not just not typical, it's against. And it was phenomenal.
It's funny you mention Rishi Kapoor and Agnipath because there was someone else that I think when he did a specific movie, which I do like, I definitely gasped when a certain thing happened. And that was Amir in 1947 Earth. He was so evil, and I did not see it coming. And he's never played anyone evil before. He'd never even played anyone with shades of gray. Shah Rukh was the one who would always experiment with those gray characters. Amir was always like goody two shoes and chocolate here and everything. And I saw 1947 Earth primarily because I liked the book, and the music was the music drew me in. And Nandita Das was great, of course. Rahul Khanna was great, and then Amir Khan, I shouldn't even have been surprised because in the book what's coming, but it was shocking when Amir Khan was so horrible in it. And I was like, no, did you just try to murder my Rahul Khanna? But he was so good in that too. And it was in the same way of Rishi Kapoor, where at least with Rishi Kapoor, he's bad. With Amir, he was like a serpent in that movie. Yeah. You just did not see him coming. So I have one movie that falls into that same category with Amir.
That's a great example.
Last night I watched Lal Singh Chadha. So in a previous episode, I had talked about how I did not want to watch that movie because I saw the promos and it was just Amir being PK all over again. And I was like, no, this is terrible. And then a bunch of our viewers/listeners had written comments and also sent me like a flurry. I had like 15 direct messages from people on the Filmi Ladies Instagram where they were like, Betu, you should really check out Lal Singh Chadha. You might like it. And people were like, at least watch it for Kareena. She's great, because that's a good hook. Like if you want me to watch a movie and you push Kareena, there's a higher likelihood I'll see it. And I have to say, I was really taken aback by how good it was. I went in with zero expectations, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't think that it was Amir playing against type, because but I think he just hasn't done anything like that. And I at least appreciate the fact that he's doing something a little bit different. There are people like Akshay Kumar Kof that don't want to do anything. So I liked him in that. I liked Kareena in it. She played something different as well. The only Kareena movie I can think of where she played against type was Chameli. But again, that was very, very early in her career. She was all of 21 in that movie. So I didn't know she was super young in it. So I didn't know if I could count that. But yeah, I had two Amir Khan movies in my hat to mention.
Nice. A movie that came up again a lot on Twitter that I also had thought of was from about, if not the same year, very much same era as Agnipath. I guess it's not the same year. Do you remember the film Shanghai? Dibakar Banerjee's Shanghai.
No, I have not seen it.
Okay, so the big villain in that movie, spoiler alert, is Farouk Sheikh.
No.
Yeah. And that just again, like now he came up multiple times because he of course is in Kanta, where he and Nasiruddin Shah sort of switched the type of roles. A lot of people
He's
brought
so
that
smart,
film up.
Katha.
Yeah.
I love
And this
him.
is kind of a different vibe, but again, because he's older, he, you know, he had kind of transitioned into interesting grandpa roles at that point. But whoa, that's and I hope I haven't just spoiled everything. I haven't rewatched the film since I initially saw it, so I don't remember if that's actually a spoiler, but I don't think it is. He's really good in that. And again, and we all know Farouk Sheikh is a very strong actor. That's not a surprise at all. And I think his career had enough diversity in it that we wouldn't have been like completely shocked at him, you know, nailing something we hadn't seen him do before. But like, this one is like, because when you think Farouk Sheikh, most of us think like gentle romantic lead in the parallel cinema, even though he did do lots of other things, but like, it's so good.
Oh my gosh. He's like the movie version of a Care Bear. Like he's so cute. Like you think he's just gonna be shooting hearts. He's so adorable.
But Care Bears are so like pastel and generic, and he's anything but, you know. He's all the colors of the rainbow, and he's so great. I got to stand.
Care Bear.
Huh?
He can be the rainbow Care Bear.
He's like a very like jewel toned Care Bear. I got to stand like a few feet behind him at a film festival once, and I was like, I wanted to like pat him and be like, hello, I love you, but I didn't. And then I'm very glad that I didn't, but he also passed away not long after that. And I was like, oh, it was my chance. But I big heart for Farouk Sheikh. I think everyone does.
I do.
One of those people that you're just like, what a career and what a human.
Yeah, he always also reminds me a little bit of Sunil Dutt. Like I always feel like he was like a later generation Sunil Dutt, but who did parallel cinema. They kind of have like a similar kind of like aura about them. But that brings me to an interesting point. I feel like the best villains or the best villainous roles are done by actors who have these baby faces and who just sort of have this like innocence about them because you get lulled by it. Like you look at a face like Farouk Sheikh's, like he was so like noble and adorable and sweet, and you're like, well, he's just the sweetest guy, isn't he? Like he's gonna help you when you need help. And like, no, but those are the ones that make the nastiest ones. So in fact, there's this movie I really want to watch. I still haven't, but mostly because I don't know where to find it. It's Gulab Gang or Gulabi Gang. Have you seen it?
No, that came up on Twitter and I remember it coming out. Yeah, but for Juhi, right?
Yeah, for Juhi, because I saw some clips from it, and she's basically this very Machiavellian politician, and she's like all about the votes, and she's very like two-faced. And the idea of Juhi being a Machiavellian politician is so far from what I think of Juhi that I want to see it for her, because I was like, was she able to actually pull it off? Because if she could pull it off, then that would be very, very wickedly delicious. So I do think that having a baby face and having like a certain softness and innocence goes a long way in doing those villainous roles.
And I suspect with that one, it also helps that since unfortunately women have to disappear by a certain age in cinema, right? Like we hadn't seen as much of her. So like the memory had really cemented, and then to come back and do something so opposite it is a good move.
Plus, Juhi actually really did not experiment at all when she was at her peak. Like she's probably one of the actresses from her era that did not take any chances whatsoever. And she's spoken about it at length in interviews about how some of the best roles were, she actually has a quote which makes her sound self-absorbed, but I don't think she meant it that way, where she said that she made other actresses' career. And when they asked her what she means by that, she said basically she would get these plum projects, and because she was too chicken to do them, she would say no. And then some other younger, hungrier actress would take the role, and then it would be like a career-making role for her. So I don't know. I do want to watch The Rat Gang.
Yeah, we should try to find that. That would be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah. And I always wear pink, and I have a pink wall, so we can be the Barbie gang.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
You'll have to wear pink too.
No problem. There's plenty of pink in my closet. Tell me another of your against types.
I was thinking about Vidya Balan in Dirty Picture, because I think the image everyone had of Vidya Balan until then, mostly cemented due to Parinita, was of this very demure, very sweet, conventionally beautiful, classy, elegant, sophisticated, educated lady. That's what you always thought of as Vidya Balan, right? She was such a lady. And then when she did Dirty Picture, I think she basically shocked everyone, and she was so good. She really bit into that role. And some of the scenes in Dirty Picture, I saw it in the movie theater, and I remember gasping. Like there's like she's letting all the rolls of fat like hang out, and she's sitting, and she has like yay long cleavage, and she's pouting, and she has all these like incredibly direct dialogues. And I think everyone was very shocked by that. Like even the dances, like "Ooh La La, Tu Hai Meri Fantasy" and everything. I don't think anyone thought that Vidya Balan could do it, because again, it's the same problem. Like even with her face, you don't think she's going to be able to pull off something that requires a little bit of oomph, because until then, all these songs that she'd done even were very like, la la la, I'm so pretty and beautiful, and I'm going to stand next to the piano while you play it, like a yesteryear's heroine. So I think Dirty Picture just took everybody, just shocked everyone. But that was a really good one too, and I love that movie so much.
You said yesteryear heroine, which makes me want to bring up one that several people on Twitter gave me this. And I have seen this film. I love it. The original Ittifaq. Have you seen that? Nanda and Rajesh Khanna.
Yes. So she's both of them.
Yeah. If you have not seen this film, it is a spectacular, very taut mystery. It's basically just those two people. For the entire, there are a few other people in it, but basically it's just those two. And, he maybe or maybe isn't a murderer trying to escape and needing to hide in her house. She maybe or maybe isn't also bad. Like it's so good. I liked the remake too, I have to admit, but the original is just so good. And especially seeing, I say both of them, because Nanda is a person I've seen quite a bit of, because as we all know, she frequently starred with Shashi Kapoor. I don't think of her as a great experimenter. I could definitely be wrong about that. But again, the era, and she's playing it fairly safe most of the time, I think. And I like her okay. She doesn't really stand out to me. Like she would not be someone I'd nominate for our major superstars of the past series, for example. But then to see her do something like this, especially to carry so much of the runtime, was really good. And then of course Rajesh Khanna was so quickly cemented as a romantic hero, and then to see him be duplicitous, possibly very bad, and all that kind of stuff was and it's not a dual role, it's just him. So that too was really good. And
when you said the original Ittifaq, I was so confused for a second, because I was like, yes, I have seen Ittifaq, but what do you mean the original? There is just the one Ittifaq. And then I vaguely remembered, like from the recesses of my memory, am I wrong? Is there a Sonakshi Sinha Ittifaq?
You are correct, which I watched partly because I like the original, but also because Akshay Khanna is in it, and
Akshay Khanna is in it.
Love him.
Yeah, and he's lovely. I love both the Khanna brothers.
Oh, I know, such a family. He plays a police officer, because that's one of the things that he does a lot of. You could watch it for him, I feel. And I'm not going to be a great Sid Malhotra apologist, but I think he's pretty good. And Sonakshi, it holds up well, and they do something different with it than the original, as I recall. So worth a
Rajesh Khanna reminds me, there is this movie, extremely creepy movie, where he plays a serial killer. Yes. And Red Rose. And okay, so I watched this movie when I was a teenager, and Red Rose, it's very hard to find Red Rose, by the way, because I believe it got an A certificate. And it
Oh,
is very creepy. So it never shows on any movie channels, like on cable or anything like that in India. I don't think it's on any streaming. So my cousin and I actually accidentally saw it on cable TV late at night. And I was in my teens, and she must have been like 11 or something, and it was late at night, and our parents were like busy or something, like they'd gone out. I was in charge, and I was like, let's just watch TV. So I'm like surfing, and then we just saw the opening credits, and it's like Rajesh Khanna and everything. I was like, oh, it's called Red Rose. It's probably a romantic movie, and it's Rajesh Khanna, and I like him. Let's watch it. And my cousin, being 11, didn't have an opinion, and she was like, okay. We got ice cream, and we started watching it. And my cousin is a coward. Okay, I mean, she's not anymore, but back then she was. And as the movie gets progressively creepier, plus it's night, plus we're alone at home, I'm like, I don't think this is a romantic movie. This is frightening me. What is he doing? It was so scary, but we watched it through, and then I was like, what the hell did we just watch?
it is on YouTube for people who are interested
Oh, it
in
is.
seeing it,
Okay.
not with subtitles. I've seen it with subtitles, so I must have a DVD somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
It's just like, what is this movie? It has very vaguely like Victorian novel or like
Sure.
Gothic novel vibes about it. So I wonder if it's like an adaptation of some book.
Good
I would not
question.
surprise me if it was.
Yeah.
Um, I had one name in my list, but I don't know if you're gonna agree with it because of the
Ooh,
too
go for
early
it.
in his career rule, and that is our dearest Ranveer Singh. And the movie that I was thinking of was Lutera.
That one came up on Twitter
Yeah,
too. I feel like
because
it might be a little early, but it was certainly
yeah,
not expected, right?
yeah, and all he ever does is play these incredibly exhausting characters. Like I get tired just looking at Ranveer Singh's characters, including the just released Circus. Like I saw the trailer and I noped out of it.
That was a
It's
hard no.
just so tiring. Like you're making all these faces in like 1 second. Aren't your facial muscles tired? Don't you just want to meditate for 10 minutes and just calm down? So he does all these like crazy roles, even like if you even look at his role in Padmavat, like yes, that's like a villain and like this genocidal maniac, but even then, it's still that like balls to the
Maniac.
wall, like crazy energy. Yeah. So literally starting with Ban Baja Barat and the Ladies versus Ricky Bell, he's basically just always played the same person. It's just the story changes. Lutera is the only role in which I can think of Ranveer Singh actually bothering to have some level of seriousness and being a little bit chilled out and being a little bit quiet. And it is also my favorite Ranveer Singh movie. I love him in that film. So that was the one I thought of for him. I would really like him to do more of those.
Mm.
So
Along those lines, I will put forward something I just saw, which I thought
yeah.
was spectacular. And I'm not doing any kind of year-end list or anything like that. But if I were, this would be on it. An action hero with Ayushmann Khurrana.
Oh, I have not seen it. You liked it?
It's so good. I loved it. I
Okay.
loved it so much. And this is another, like, I think by this time we could say that he has a type of,
Oh, for sure.
and as we've talked about on this podcast, it's not just him, it's the type of film.
Yeah.
And obviously people are coming to him with these kinds of roles, but I'm so glad for him that he got to do something very different. It's a very different kind of film. It's a different kind of role. He's just completely different in it. And I think it really speaks to his abilities. And I hope that he gets some more interesting options like this. I would, if people didn't see one of his earlier films, Natanki Sala, I really liked that too, where he is not playing the, savior of wokeness or anything.
Right.
And the film is not that either. So highly recommend. On the heels of that, I was like, well, maybe I'll try to watch Dr. G. Oh God, I got 25 minutes into that, and I was like, no, this is a nope.
No.
And again, not his fault. Like that movie just seems like
it just seems like drivel.
Yeah, I don't need it.
I was very grumpy because when we went to see Kantara in the movie theater, and I was so immersed in it, and this is an Indian movie theater in Fremont. So because it's literally an Indian run chain, they have intermissions just like in India,
Nice.
and then you have ads and everything. Yeah. And so I'm okay with watching any kind of film trailer at the beginning of a film because I don't care. I'm not immersed in the movie's world yet, so it's fine. But this was Kantara. I was riveted from the first frame of the film, so phenomenal. And then in the intermission, the trailer was for Dr. G. And I was like, can you not? Like,
Bad.
what? And now I'm expected to like snap back from that drivel to like Kantara again. And I was like, that's the only time I've regretted the Indian system of intermissions because I was like, no, please don't.
That's an interesting question, though. Like, if you show a trailer at interval,
Yeah,
that's a real risk to both the trailer
exactly.
and the main feature.
Like I can watch a trailer, like a trailer for Ponniyin Selvan or something. I mean, even though it came out before Kantara, something like that during the intermission is fine because it's still kind like, but Dr. G, like what? It's just the cognitive dissonance is too much for the
Yeah.
brain.
I would
But
rather
yeah,
not, I think.
yeah. But I heard about Action Hero from a bunch of people where they said that the movie just sank like
Oh,
without
really?
a trace.
Oh,
Yes,
oh,
no
oh,
one
yeah,
watched
box
it.
office wise. Yeah.
Right.
You
But
gotta
also
see
it wasn't
it. I
marketed
highly
at all.
recommend.
That's what
I,
everyone said. Like all the people who actually. So this is what I don't. I know this is a digression, but what would we be if we weren't digressing? Um, we're all about the tangents, or at least I am. But this was the other thing I was thinking. Like, how are these promos and trailers being cut, and how are they being edited, and how are these movies being marketed where it's like Lal Singh Chadda, the movie was so much better than what the promos were, and I avoided watching it because I thought it was going to be idiotic, and then all the people convinced me to, and I'm glad I watched it. And then with An Action Hero, they didn't promote it at all. I did not hear about it
mm,
at all. The title is terrible. And now everyone who's seen it is telling me that it's really good and I do want to watch it. So I'm like, what is going wrong with these promotions? I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. And how do you get anything through the clutter of, if you don't have a major star, how do you
Mm,
get anything through because I'm on Twitter all the time and
yeah.
I had barely heard about it.
I
Um,
know. I'm on Instagram all the time. I hadn't heard about An Action
yeah,
Hero.
I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
mm,
know. And
okay.
I'm sorry. And, obviously we're in the US, so maybe it's different here, but I hope at least it sounds like
I
not a ton of people in India were convinced to go
no.
see it either, which is too bad because it
Like
really
none
is
of my
very
friends.
strong. I don't think it will suffer particularly from being seen on the small screen. So I really hope people will give
Yeah.
it a chance. I was, it would definitely be in my top 3 of the year that I saw. I loved everything about it
Wow.
except one little thing that I can talk about with Pitu after she's seen it. But
Yeah.
it was spectacular. I thought
Okay.
really,
I'll
really
check it
good.
out. What else was on your list?
Okay. I've got a couple more that I want to talk about, and I'm going to save. All right. Let me do one more man.
Mhm.
Again, this is very man-centered from my end, and it's not how I wanted to be. Here we are. We have to talk about Shashi Kapoor in Junoon.
Yes. So good.
Uh, Not the Were Tiger movie, the other one.
No.
Although seeing him in a Were Tiger movie would also be a bit of a surprise, although
Yes.
not because he's a master of masala, so not too much of a surprise.
Right.
If you have not seen Junoon, the Sham Benegal film, it is about the rebellion of 1857. He
Mhm.
plays a bad, evil. Is he a Nawab? Is he a prince? I don't know. I don't remember what
Right.
his rank is, but he's a very bad man. And what I think makes it work so well, in addition to him just being a very good actor, that beyond what often people gave him credit for, is the smoldering in that
Yes.
film is through the roof. Like, man is setting this, in fact, very building basically
Right.
on fire in Lucknow in 1857. Like, it is phenomenal.
He was
Phenomenal.
very hot.
But like evil, but
Yeah.
it's so good. And I almost don't want to say anything more about it, so I don't spoil it for
No.
people who haven't seen it. But that really is, um, I feel like proponents of parallel cinema
Mm.
do it a disfavor by how they talk about it.
Oh, what
Some
do
of
you
the
mean?
people, well, I just feel like there's people on the internet who defend parallel cinema in such a pedantic, boring way, and
Yeah.
they're such snobs about it. This
Yeah.
film, there is nothing inaccessible or this has emotion and drama and fire, and intrigue and all that stuff. Like it's as much a pot boiler as anything
Yeah.
else, right? But it's just done so beautifully. So this was a film that I think I resisted for a little bit because people were pedantic and tiresome about it. But
Yeah.
then, I did watch it fairly early on in my Shashi Kapoor deep dive that continues to this day. And
Your Shashi Kapoor journey.
yeah, it's like that, a top 10 for him, I would say. It's a
Yeah, for
fantastic film. And
sure.
the other people in it are also extremely good.
Mhm.
But yeah, you should just see it when you
Yeah.
need a good historical drama. It's fantastic.
It's so funny. I started watching parallel cinema and also like a lot of the Satyajit Ray movies when I moved to India. So I only lived in India for 5 years, and they would do this thing on DD on Doordarshan where every afternoon at 2 o'clock, when people are basically siesta time, like everyone is napping, at 2 o'clock they would always show a movie on Doordarshan, and it was always an NFDC produced
Ah,
movie. So they were almost always parallel cinema. And I would come, and I'm an anti-napper, like I hate naps. So I would come home from college and my mom would be like, okay, siesta time, good night, goodbye. And she would leave. And then me and my cat would be like, well, what do I do now? It's too hot to go anywhere. So we would be a captive audience. And my cat and I would watch a 2 o'clock movie. And that's how I watched all of the parallel cinema, all like the Sham Benegal's and the Govind Helani's, and all of those films at that time. It was amazing, actually. And the point you made about people doing parallel cinema disservice, I agree with that also regarding Satyajit Ray films. The
100%.
only reason, yes, the only reason I've seen Ray films is again because it was 2 o'clock and I was a captive audience, and Doordarshan made me watch them. But the way people talk about him, it's so rarefied and so pretentious that you almost want to smack those people. It's like, can you not? And it's like, how many multi-syllabic adjectives can I use to describe a basic scene? It's very irritating. But when you actually watch his films, they're so watchable
They're
and so
so
relevant.
they're relevant,
Yeah,
accessible, deeply
they're
human,
they're even
super
fun.
engaging,
Yeah.
just
I mean, I wouldn't
fantastic
call
top to
Pather
bottom.
Panchali fun,
They're
but
also, some of them are very funny.
yeah, they are.
Well, I feel
So,
like
but
we
I
have
wouldn't know
one
that.
Ms. Nargis to thank for some of this with her like odious, anti World of Apu nonsense. But
Who? Wait,
sure.
what? What did I just
Didn't
miss?
Nargis stand up in Congress and say that Ray was doing India a disservice by making films about poor people? I'm pretty sure she
Oh, I had
did.
no idea.
I think so.
Oh,
We'll have to
interesting.
check that. But yeah, and that's somehow the image, I think, and it's
Yeah.
not correct in any
Whereas
way.
all the films I've seen of his, well, apart from the Apu were, they're all set in Havelis.
I've seen
It's
literally all
like,
his films and they're set all kinds of places, right? So they're
yeah,
they're about the breadth of humanity.
yeah, they are. But you wouldn't know that from the way
Nope.
people talk about them.
No,
And
and
then you
it's
watch
just,
them and they're eminently fun. And
yeah.
what? Well, some
Yeah,
of them are.
people are such tiresome pedants about so many things, as I'm sure I am about things like Shashi Kapoor. But
No, I don't think you are.
put aside the tiresome pedantry and watch some of these. Give them a try, at least. I think you will be pleasantly surprised if you have not already. And if you only saw Janoon like as a kid on afternoon TV or something, like give it a revisit. It's super. I think that's probably true for most of those, right? They're really wonderful. And then you can have a Farouk Sheikh break as well, which everybody needs.
Yes. Shake is just a breath of fresh air.
Mm,
I wanted to ask you how you felt, because I got confused when I was thinking about Ranbir Kapoor, right?
mm.
Because I was thinking, okay, when has he played against type? But the thing is, I think Ranbir Kapoor has been so experimental from his first movie, like even from Savaria, that I
Yeah.
don't think he has a type
I don't think so either.
because I was struggling.
He has a little bit of a type of film. And
Yeah.
I think that most of us would say that is the, man child who needs to grow up and is trying to figure his shit out. I don't think that's unique to him. I think a lot of
No.
Hindi film male, men stars do that
F
kind of film.
especially.
Yeah. So that I don't think that that's really fair to shoulder him with that particularly. I would say that I don't think he really has a type because he has been
Yeah.
smartly experiment. He has had good opportunities and he has chosen them wisely, I would say. Better
Yeah,
than probably anyone else.
yeah, because when I made my list, I was like, no, but that's not against what. And then I was like, wait, what is his type? And then I couldn't think of one.
So
So
someone on Twitter suggested Nawazuddin Siddiqui in Kahani. And I was like, he doesn't have a type.
no, he doesn't have a type.
He doesn't have a type. Thank God. And he has done everything and does a lot of it very well, and does some of it, very hammily, but it's still really fun. Like the villain in Kick, for example. I really enjoy him in that film. So, and in Mona Michael, for example, where he's like a, gangster kind of, and anyway, that film is very much a comedy. So yeah, you can't, I thought that was a really curious suggestion, because I'm like, he of all people, maybe more than literally anyone I can name, does not have a type.
Right.
So
I think he's also in that like Nasiruddin Shah category, where Nasiruddin Shah doesn't have a type. He's done everything from like every parallel cinema you can think of, to literally something like Trishul and Tirchi Topi Wale and all of that stuff, to the Lecce superstar in A Dirty Picture. Like he's done it all. The man
he
is
came
an
up a lot on
institution.
Twitter, and I would disagree with any of those, because I don't think he really has a type. I would say, especially at this point in his career, he has done everything.
Yeah. So I want to talk about my favorite movie in this category, and it really is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love everything about it, including the soundtrack. And so I basically wanted to talk about Saif as Langda Tyagi in Omkara.
That came up a lot on Twitter. That was probably the number one suggestion.
Who saw that coming? No one.
Right.
And I will admit that I was one of the naysayers, because I love Vishal Bharadwaj. I think he's so brilliant. I love Rekha Bharadwaj. Like I just love everything about his movies. And I do like Saif, but I like Saif when he's being urban and metrosexual and silly. I like him in Dil Chahta Hai and Kal Ho Na Ho and things like that, or Salam Namaste and stuff like that. And then when it came out, this is back in the old like Twitter and blogging days, and I heard that Vishal Bharadwaj was casting him in the Indian adaptation of Othello, and he was going to be Langda Tyagi. I was like, what? Saif Ali Khan? How is that even possible? And I was like, this is the most idiotic casting on the planet. And I was a complete naysayer. And then I watched it and I was like, what just happened, dude? He was spectacular.
So good. Yeah.
So good. Everything, like not just his acting. I mean, we know Saif Ali Khan can act. So it wasn't just, for me, it wasn't like, I didn't think he wasn't going to be able to act. I just thought he wasn't going to be believable. Because he's so like to the manner born, and to imagine him in like a dhoti and like in like a rural Bihar milieu and speaking with an accent and the weird hair, I was like, it's just not gonna work. And boy, was I surprised, but I'm glad I was. So he's my number one.
That's a great example. Do you think that's a question of, so clearly whoever cast him saw something that the rest of us didn't, but also we have such a strong director. That's going to be one of the big factors, right? So it'd be interesting to kind of look back at a lot of these and see, like, is the common factor actually the director? And you would hope that it is.
Yeah.
But in such a star-powered cinema, I forget who was talking about this the other day, about like, aren't all cinemas like star driven at some point? Like people hold up a lot of Indian popular cinemas in that way, but like, aren't they all really? I'm like,
yeah, they are.
I don't know enough about global cinema to say, but like fair. Right. I think that's a good question to ask. But yeah, you've got to really get someone in there who is strong, and then somehow convince the actor to listen and do as told.
Yeah, exactly. And not let him just like run roughshod.
You can have strong directors who are not able to, get their way with certain people.
Yeah.
Another person that came up in a Bharadwaj film was Shahid Kapoor in Kamine.
Oh, yes.
Which it's kind of similar, right? Like taking a sort of pretty boy type and doing something different with him was a good idea.
I didn't feel like it was that different though from what, because I feel like Shahid,
I don't think it's as different, but it's, and at that time, right? Like this is well before Kabir Singh.
Right.
And, some of that stuff. So
Punjab, way before that. Yeah.
But Punjab comes up. Go ahead.
At this point has also kind of solidified his filmography to the point that I don't think he has a type at all anymore. He did start out being the rom-com chocolatey person, but yeah.
Okay. What was I going to say? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, but I thought that was another good. I think that's another good. And someone brought up Priyanka Chopra in Sakhun Maaf, which of course another Bharadwaj film. And I would say, again,
she doesn't have a type.
Right. And so when oh my God, what was that show she was on? Quantico? Is that what it was
Oh,
called?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, when Quantico came out, a Canadian fashion magazine commissioned me to write a piece about, like, if you're new to watching Priyanka Chopra, here are 10 must-see films of hers from her Indian filmography. And I was like, oh, this is a challenge because I'm not a fan.
No.
But when I looked into her movies, she's really done quite a few things that are not blank, pretty heroine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not super earlier in her career, I would say, but like she did that. She did fashion. She did Mary Combe. She did What's Your Rashi? She's
Yeah.
done quite a few things that are not cookie cutter,
Yeah.
pretty woman kind of deals. Um, so I think that she is a person who maybe is willing to experiment more, and that means something to her more than we maybe give her credit for, or at least
Yeah.
people like I'm not an anti-Priyanka, but like I find her American foray extremely tiresome.
Yeah.
And all the like stop. But in Hindi films, I like her just fine. But I think she actually
Yeah.
has done kind of more than I remember to give her credit for right away.
I think like one of those people that for me, and I am a fan, so I'm probably a little bit biased. But one person that I do give a lot of credit for trying very hard from the get-go, from their first film, to not be typecast and to take chances. How successful those chances were varies, but I'm talking about Aishwarya Rai.
Hmm.
Um, this is a woman who was famous before she even entered the film industry
Yeah.
because she was a top model. All of us remember her Pepsi ad, and then of course she became Miss India and Miss World. And literally for her to take on a role like Irovar and making that her first film, I mean, I think that took a lot of courage. And Mani Ratnam probably saw something in her where he thought she could pull it off. Now, granted, part of Irovar is her playing Jayalalitha and being all like fashionable and cool and trendy and all of those things, like basically being a film star. But part of it is also her as this, village housewife person. And I thought she did that well. She also did a lot of different roles and early on, like, she did Provoked, which is, I thought she was very good in it. Naveen Andrews is very frightening in Provoked. The movie itself is okay. She did Chokher Bali, she did Raincoat. And she was really good in both Chokher Bali and Raincoat. And one of her movies that I haven't seen because I have a feeling it's going to be tiresome and I haven't heard good things about it, but she really seems to have tried hard, is Sarabjit,
Mhm.
where she played Randeep Huda's older sister.
That's right.
She has like the glasses and
Yeah.
everything. And I just haven't heard enough good things about the film that made me want to watch it. But she's another person that's experimented a
Mm.
lot and she doesn't get enough credit for it. But again, some of her, anytime she works with Mani Ratnam, it works out. But then with some of her other films, I think the director is just so smitten by her beauty and her star power that they don't necessarily make her emote to the best of her ability. So to your
Let me
point of, the director being in charge. So
let me bring up a person I know that we both have strong feelings about. So our friend of us from blogging days, Temple in Australia brought up.
mhm.
She had a couple suggestions, but one of them is she thinks we should talk about Shah Rukh in Rais or Fan
Oh,
because
okay.
it's kicking back against the carefully cultivated persona.
Mm,
Um, I take the point again. I'm not sure that I think Shah Rukh has a type,
yeah,
especially by this point. If he had done those in like 2005 or something, maybe, although he'd already done Ashoka at that point, which I'd
yeah,
say not. So I know that there is the Rahul image that most people or that many people conjure up when they think of him, or that's sort
yeah,
of the default before you think any further about it. The man's always done lots of different kinds of things.
yeah.
Um, Maybe there's one that resonated with the box office most of all. Um, but I'm not sure, like an image and a type maybe are a little bit different, but I think those are worth talking about. And I fully appreciate those films in his,
Yeah.
as we think about aging heroes, right? Like he has been
Mhm.
diversifying in ways that I find important and impactful. And even if the films as wholes are not successful, I feel that he is very successful in those roles for
Mhm.
me. I love both those films immensely. Um, and I'm so glad that he is willing to try things.
I think, I mean, yeah, I don't think Shah Rukh Khan has a type. I think if there's anyone who has shown a lot of guts and who has experimented from the get-go, it's been that guy.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, like no one, absolutely no one can say that the man has played it safe.
Right.
Playing safe would be what Rishi Kapoor and Sunny Deol were doing when
Yeah.
he burst on the scene. And then
Yeah.
when he did movies like Dar and Divana, I mean, he has played like, the negative guy, the person with shades of gray. He's played a freaking psychopath in so many movies early on, like in Bazigar. I don't know how he thought he was going to become a huge superstar given the kind of roles he was playing, but he proved everyone wrong. So if there's anyone who doesn't have a type, I would say it's Shah Rukh. But if I absolutely had to pick a movie where he plays against type, it actually wouldn't be Race or Fan, because in those movies he still has an opportunity to do something a little bit grandiose and very emotive,
Big.
especially in Race.
Yeah.
Yeah, like his thing has always been go big or go home.
Yeah.
He always goes big. You may want him to rein it in a little, but he never under emotes. He never does under anything.
No.
The only movie then that I would say that sticks out for me as being very different would be his role in Dear Zindagi,
Oh, yeah.
where
And
he's the psychiatrist.
someone on Twitter suggested Sweaties, which I think again gets at the kind of smaller-ish
Yeah,
ish.
yeah. To me, Swades, Paheli, Chak De India, they're sort of all in that same zone. But again, you still
Mhm.
have that like emotionality that you
Yeah.
associate with him, and the big emotions. There's still big emotions in them. Um, I think for Shah Rukh to basically go against type is for Shah Rukh to just be very like monotone and not be super emotional and not be super basically detached. Shah Rukh
Which
is
is
the
Dear
anti Shah
Zindagi,
Rukh,
sort of.
which
I mean,
would be
he's even, but there's emotion in there and there's like
yeah.
engagement, but it's fairly small,
Yeah, which
played
you
small.
would right, which you would want from a psychiatrist.
Yes, it would not be appropriate for it to
Can you
be
imagine
otherwise.
Ranveer Singh as a psychiatrist? Oh, good golly.
Yeah, or Ayushman, he's going to save the world through, or Akshay Kumar.
No, please no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but for
there,
Shah Rukh, I would pick Jahangir, Dr. Jahangir. I think his
yeah,
last name is Khan in the movie. I don't know, in
I think
Dear
so. Yeah.
Zindagi. Yeah.
I want to talk about a woman now.
Okay.
And this will not surprise you because she is my favorite, Rani Mukherjee.
Yes.
She came up a couple different times in a couple different ways. Someone, our friend Bhushan suggested No One Killed Jessica, which I feel like,
Hmm.
yeah, pretty well. I would say certainly different than what she'd done before. Our friend Myth said, she brought up the idea of Rani playing a Punjabi
Oh, yeah,
in
in Dil Bole Hadipa.
Muji Dosti Kurogi as well. She was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
that never worked for me. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So like regional type or ethnic type or whatever the right cultural type
Right.
was an interesting, like, oh, I never, and because I, obviously I'm not Indian, that like, I don't know enough about some of that to really like, for that to ping.
Right.
I thought that was interesting, but I think we have to talk about Mardani because,
Hmm.
I mean, the name from the film from the get-go, we're like, this is a masculine woman. This is a
Yeah.
hero woman. And for those who haven't heard me say, I've written a book chapter about that film. I love that film. I think she's amazing in it. But the whole like concept of what's going on in that film
Hmm.
is very much a woman who is the hero. And that is
Yeah.
a very
Who
specific
wears
kind
the
of like
pants?
woman-centric film and all that
Right.
garbage. But like everything she does in there is what a hero usually does. And
Hmm.
there's no attempt to make it a more like a softened sort of womanized version of what a hero is.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think that film is incredibly good and just so well done and has a lot going on. And talks quite a bit about, our fears around the city, about the anonymity of cities, about maybe
Hmm.
about independent women, even about unsupervised children, about tech, like also there's all sorts of stuff in that film. But I really do think that, and obviously a lot of women have played police officers, but so often they are avenging something personal.
Right.
And she does have a personal link to the case in this film, but it's not the only reason she does it. And I think that's quite important
Hmm.
because when women get to be out in the world doing things, it is so very often because of a tie to their family or something like that. Like it's it's still got a huge feel of domesticity to it. And this film does not have that. And I think that's incredibly important and different. And especially when it followed so closely on the heels of Aya, where she's also a hero, but in a romantic hero sort of way. So she, in a double whammy, did this romantic hero and action hero kind of set of films. And I love that for her, and just wish that she got to do more of those things. That said, I have not seen Mardani 2 because I love the first one so much. Like, I almost don't want to see another installation from that world. But and obviously there's issues with making cops heroes that are more widely understood at this point. But I don't know. So I think that one's important. Do you have any other women on your list other than Aishwarya?
One, but it's questionable. But also, when you were talking about Mardani and about a cop and everything, have you seen that TV show? It's called The Fall. It's set in Ireland.
No, too scary for Beth. No,
because I was gonna say, like, the lead in that. So it's it's Gillian Anderson from like X-Files and all of that, and she plays this detective in it, and her name is Stella, and she is amazing. Like, if you want to see a really good portrayal, like a woman's portrayal of like a police officer or a detective or something, she is so badass, and she will like take no prisoners, and she's amazing. She has really good lines, very author back role, and she's just like, I mean, I was screaming at the TV, I was like, go Stella, I love you, Stella. She's just amazing. She has great lines, and she loves antagonizing these like very annoying patriarchal men, and it's so satisfying to watch. If you can get past, and it is scary, but if you can get past the scary thing, maybe you should watch a clip of like her being Stella, because it's really very, very satisfying, Beth. Okay. In my list, I vaguely had like one man in there, which is Hrithik Roshan in Super 30, because again, that's him doing. But the thing is, I haven't seen that movie, and it's impossible to find. It's on none of the streaming things I know. So I wanted to watch it. My mom really liked that movie, actually. So I wanted to see it, but I couldn't find it. When we were talking about like how did Saif Ali Khan even get the role of Langla Tyagi, and I was thinking to myself, well, I don't know the story behind this, but did he perhaps go and like ask for that role? Because sometimes actors do that, and I have an example of that where Zeenat Aman apparently back in the day really wanted to show her acting chops, because she was always cast as this like very glamorous person, and she never really had much of a chance to show off her acting. And so she apparently did this whole thing where she went to Raj Kapoor and said that she wanted to be cast in Satyam Shivam Sundaram. And he was like, no, because you can't play a village belle, and also you don't know how to dance, and so it's just not going to be believable. And then she was like, no, I can do it. And apparently I read that she fully like dressed up in like a lehenga choli and stuff like that, and got all the makeup done, and like she literally like hounded him. She went to RK Studios dressed like that. She had like a little earthen pot. She made him screen test him and be like, no, I can play this role. And finally he was like, well, do a few dance steps, let me see if you can dance, and she did a little bit of that, and then she convinced him to cast her in Satyam Shivam Sundar. It's a pity the movie is such horrible drac. It is so horrible, but I like the effort she did. I like the fact that she went and kind of like chased this role and tried to convince the producer and the director that she could do it. I always like it when women speak up for themselves and they're like, me, take me, I can do it. And they, I like that. I just wish the movie was better.
And there is, unfortunately, really something to the idea of a woman star who's known for being physically beautiful agreeing to take on a role where she has to not be. And that film, like,
I know.
She has her veil over her face, like, and this is the society we live in makes this an extreme eye roll that's considered,
right.
She is so ugly, and Shashi's reaction, his character's reaction in that film, he's the worst in that movie.
He's such a
he's so awful. He's so awful. And when you think about, like, ooh, Gwyneth Paltrow put on a fat suit, or ooh, Charlize Theron is like,
right.
has some
Or
dust on
Halle
her face
Berry.
or whatever. You're
Yeah.
just like, Jesus, like, but there is something to that. And I think it deserves to be picked apart at a more kind of film by film level, but problematic, but also true or something. I don't know. It's hard to get the brain around all the issues when pretty women have to not be pretty.
It's just hard to get your brain around Satyam Shivam Sundaram because it is such a terrible movie,
Yeah,
first
don't
of all.
bother.
It's
Don't
just
bother.
so bad. But I mean, that I think when she did that movie, it was considered like a big deal because it was the first time you were seeing her in such a glam avatar, and it's something that she kind of went after and championed herself, which we're big fans of women championing themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which leads me to someone on Twitter named Amazing Grace, thank you, wrote in Alia in Darlings, and I feel like now I don't know if I think Alia has a type.
No.
But I don't think any of us really saw this coming for her. So because it's not the same kind of thing as a Punjab, for example. So it's against other things she's done, certainly. And this person also suggested Deepika in Piku, which I was like, oh, yeah, I feel like I think like against type, maybe, or at least sort of different from type. So again, this like, is it just different or is it actually against? Worth thinking about, but it
so
is
there's
interesting.
A Deepika movie that I didn't see, and she really, really pissed me off during the promotions of that film, where I was just like, ugh, you suck. But she did this movie called Chapak, where she plays an acid attack victim, and she definitely had like all of the makeup and everything going on. I didn't watch that movie, and she did this terrible promotional strategy that I was just like so disgusted, where she asked people on Instagram and TikTok, wait for it, to ask people, especially makeup artists, to do chapak makeup and to tag her and post it. And I was like, are you effing kidding me? And I was just so infuriated by that whole thing.
That doesn't seem like a good idea.
No, it was a terrible idea. She did get a lot of flack for it, which she 100% deserved. And I'm sure it wasn't her idea, but you're a big enough star that if your PR people or your stupid like marketing people come up with these ideas, you got to put your foot down, lady.
And you've got to consult with like NGOs and people who actually deal with these issues.
You can also try to use your brain. That would also be helpful.
That's really hard for some people. So at least know who to ask when you can't figure it out yourself.
Oh. I know. I was just, what? You want people to do what? You want them to do chapak makeup and pretend to be. There were literally all these like people that she was like reposting, where it's in like her Insta stories or whatever, where it was like makeup artists who had like done chapak makeup, and then they put like a dupatta over their face, and it was like before and after. And I was like, this is so bad. I'm not going to watch the movie because I'm infuriated right now. But that is an example of someone who, I guess, did something very different against their type. So, for what it's worth.
Another Twitter user, suggested, this is Shunak, thank you, for suggested Supriya Pathak in Ram Leela and Shanghai. So that's another interesting. I completely forgotten about both of those. So I thought that was a great one.
Really wicked in Ram Leela.
Yeah.
I did not
and
see
again,
that
like, I don't know what her type was. I haven't seen enough of her earlier stuff to say that, but like certainly like surprise casting or reveal. I would say that's
her most recent thing that she's famous for. Like obviously she's like a parallel cinema actor, and she's done some amazing work. Like Supriya Pathak is great, but she has most recently become very famous for this TV show she does where she plays a character called Hansa. I love watching Hansa clips, where she's basically this rich, extremely lazy person who just likes to put on makeup and jewelry all day long, and she's completely dim-witted. Like she's really like a bimbo, and she's just very like happy and cute. And she has this famous line which goes, Are babuji mein to thak gayi. And I love saying that. Like I'll just do like a little bit of vacuuming, and then I'll just sit down on the sofa like Hansa, and I'll just be like, Hey babuji, mein to thak gayi. So she's like most known for that recently, and she's like such a pop culture icon in India right now. Like there's all these memes with her. I'll send some to you. She's hilarious. So for her to be this like nasty person in Ram Leela, I was definitely taken aback by that too. So good one.
Let me read you a couple of the other ones from Twitter, because most of these are from films I haven't seen, so I have no opinion. But from Varun Grover, he suggested Johnny Lever in Kareeb.
I've seen Kareeb a long time ago. Is it the one with Bobby Deol and Neha?
I have no idea.
I saw it so long, I don't remember.
He names Dharmendra in Satyakam.
Yes, that's a good one. Have you seen Satyakam?
No, but I read about it yesterday. And I felt like I should see it. Yeah.
He plays this very like morally upright, upstanding person in Satyakam, and like to the point where he's like virtuous to the point that this guy gonna get hurt real bad because of the world we live in, but just like very like idealistic person. A little bit reminiscent, not too much, but a little bit reminiscent of the role he has in Anupama with Sharmila Tagore, like just this very like noble person.
I forever. So one of my goals for 2023 is watch more Dharmendra movies, because he comes up in every single episode of this show. And I think
you should also diversify and watch more movies of Sunny Paji.
I will. Yeah. There's just so many to watch. And also another goal is to watch more like 70s masala. So those two things go together really well. But that the transformation of Dharmendra from like kind of like lover boy into action ham is so interesting. And the 70s seem to be this kind of sweet spot where the transition is still happening. And like, I love it. And so because I knew the later version first. So when I see the earlier stuff, like, I can't wait for him to start beating people up. Oh, he's not gonna.
That's the funny thing about Dharmendra though, that he was actually incredibly talented. He's a very gifted actor.
Yeah,
like especially if you see Satyakam, that's probably his best role, like acting wise. But I think he didn't actually have that much of an opportunity to show off his acting chops. I think Sunny Deol actually had a good chance to show off his acting chops with his acting in like, Yatim and Ghayal and Ghatak. Like he really had a chance to show what he got. But that's also because he's not as versatile as Dharmendra is. Dharmendra can do a lot.
And he's so funny. He's such a good comic actor too.
Sunny Paji is not funny.
Yeah. Another one that came up from Varun was Amrish Puri in Gardish, which I have not seen. But like, I mean, boy, does that man have a type. But he's also a very good actor, and I can imagine him, really. I don't. Is there a biography of him? I hope that there is, because I would like to read it. But like, he's fascinating. His whole family.
I'm just scared of him. There's an Instagram filter you can use where it makes your face Amrish Puri. Sometimes just to entertain myself, I like to put the Insta filter on and I become Amrish Puri and I just like say inane things. It's so much fun.
And then he also named Madhuri in Prahar. I have not seen this film. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Prahar is really good. It's actually Nana Patekar's first or only directorial venture. It's an amazing movie. I've seen it. It's set. It will remind you a little bit of Fauji because it's set in this sort of like military sort of a background. And Madhuri plays the lead. I forget the lead's first name, but he is the son of, I think, Arun Zogarekar. I don't know. It's a Marathi actor. He's his son, but he plays the main character, and Madhuri is his girlfriend, and she's completely de-glam, like she's worn not a stitch of makeup in that movie, and it's a really interesting role that she has. She really got a chance to sort of show off her acting chops in that film, like a lot of like emotion. And even though she's kind of like a supporting role, she does have like a good meaty role. And she's actually more impressive in that movie than the main lead is. And I actually had read an interesting interview of hers a really long time back where she had spoken about her favorite movies and she'd mentioned Prahar. And she talked about how Nana Patekar told her that he'll give her the role, but because she wanted to play that role very much, and he was like, fine, I'll give it to you, but you have to be like, you can't have a stitch of makeup, it has to be a clean face throughout. And she's like, yeah, sure, of course. And she showed up at the first day of shooting and she'd worn like a little bit of lip gloss and a little bit of blusher, and then she thought, well, my hair doesn't have enough volume, so she like quickly like just did a little bit of the thing, and then fluffed out her hair and went on the sets. And Nana Patekar takes one look at her and is like, nope, go and wash your face. And she's like, I don't have anything on. And he was like, you do. And she's like, fine. And then she had to like go and wash off her face. make it completely clean. He told her hair was too like fluffy and she had to like brush it off again and make it like really plain.
I
And then
love
she was
that.
like, God damn it.
There's a lot of men you can fool into you're not wearing makeup, but
Yeah.
an actor is probably not one of them.
No, yeah. Yeah,
That's
I know. I
great.
love it when like men are like, I really love like the natural
Isn't that the
look. But
best?
there's like the natural look involves like 7 layers of foundation and contouring and all sorts of
Let me
things.
get you a scraper and you can see.
Yeah. Yeah, is a good one. There's a really nice song in it that's like at a military gala, like a ball, and she's wearing a very fluffy bubblegum pink dress that I love very much. It's sparkly. And she's there waltzing around the room. I'll send you a link. I'll put the link in the YouTube
Oh, great.
description. It's really cute.
Nice.
So yeah.
That's, I mean, I've got a bunch more from Twitter that most of which I haven't seen. I can put them in the show notes for this if anyone is interested. But do you have
I'm
any kind
looking
of,
at my list.
yeah, is there anyone else you want to talk about?
Not really, but the only thing I would say is I was actually thinking of SRK in Rabni Banadi Jodi because I think it's the Surinder Sani, the Punjab Power guy, because I think that's the only time I've actually seen him play sort of like a nerd.
Yeah.
That's the only time that would be like Shah Rukh's D Glam, right?
Yeah.
With the hair and everything.
Yeah.
And then in my notes, I'd written, this is the actual thing I wrote. I wrote Amitabh's transition from angry young man to annoying elder statesman. So there was that shift that happened between the Zanjeer and the the
Yeah.
Trishul and all of that. Amitabh that we know to Parampara, Pratishtha, Anushasan, that guy.
Someone on Twitter actually said they think that his aging is like the best thing that ever happened to Hindi cinema because it opened up all these ideas. And I just closed my notes, and I'm sorry to whoever said that because I have your name written down. I'm sorry. I will put it in the notes. But yeah, and like I think I've mentioned on this podcast before, I recently saw Ux, which falls in that realm of like he's trying to come back, and he's much more willing to take different chances.
Because he did have that awkward phase in the middle during his transition where he did these really god-awful things like Shahenshah, which my husband loves, by the way.
You know I love Shahenshah.
Of course I do.
Is it a 70s holdover? I love it.
So he did those in between things, and then suddenly he became like the guy from Mohabbatein. And oh my God, I read something the other day that blew my mind. Amitabh Bachchan's age in Mohabbatein as the school principal or whatever he is the school principal, is the same age as Shah Rukh Khan now, 56. Yes, and we have Shah Rukh doing all these songs in Pathan looking like Johnny Depp.
That's confusing to me.
I know. I was like, wait, what? How can that be?
I mean, it is true that 56 in 2023 is different than 56 at other points, but like even with that math in place, like
yeah,
I have to say Amitabh as paterfamilias is the worst.
I know.
I never want to see it. He can do it, and sometimes he makes it more interesting than other times. And like, you know, he had a little bit of that going in Brahmastra. But not only that, and like again, the context was different enough that like it worked. And like I very much feel like he knew exactly what kind of movie he was in, and he brought exactly the right material to that film. So like it's not always a complete wash for me, but like that is not interesting. I understand culturally like how it resonates and works, and it's an easy default to put him into.
Right.
And we also probably all can name real life people we knew who were firebrands when they were young, who aged into like, well, what we see happening with baby boomers all around the world, for example. Like they were the 60s rebellious era, but then look at them now, like, but it's not interesting cinema.
No, I read a quote once about baby boomers because they're the generation I love to hate. Hopefully we don't have baby boomers listening to our show.
Probably not.
But there was a dialogue. Yeah, probably not. But there was a line that someone said, this was the generation that thought that they would completely change the world. And they ended up investing in the Home Shopping Network. I was like, basically.
Yeah. I mean, they were handed a lot of problems to deal with as we all are, but like, ooh, yeah. my parents are just a little bit older than baby boomers, so I can be with you. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not a.
I take a lot of pride in being Gen X, by the way.
Hell
I'm so
yeah.
proud of being Gen X.
Heck
People
yeah.
mistakenly think I'm a millennial, and I have nothing against millennials. I have a lot of millennial friends, and I do love them, and
A lot of my
but I'm
friends
like,
are
I am
millennials.
not a millennial. What's that?
A lot of my friends are millennials.
Yeah, I know. I
I'm
have a lot
X.
of millennial friends, and I do like them, but I'm a Gen Xer, okay?
Yep,
I
big
am
time.
yeah, my people are like Keanu and what is this person that I used to love? Blanking on his name, the guy from Beverly Hills 90210 who recently passed.
Luke
Rest in peace.
Perry.
Yes, Luke Perry. Luke Perry, Ethan Hawke. Okay, I am Gen X and I'm very, very proud of it. So no, do
Same.
not categorize me as anything else. But yeah, it's so weird the pride people take in their generation.
I know, like it could not have less to do with your choices. Really, well, I mean, but it is very, it does shape a lot, right? And it's not just
Yeah,
cultural references, that's a lot of it, but it does shape a
I'm
lot with like
so
what's
Gen
going on.
X in my mindset. Like I can't even imagine
Yeah.
being any other generation. Like I am very much like that, those people. So yeah. Okay, so I think we spoke whatever. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there anyone currently who has a very strong type that you would like to see do something very, very opposite to it? And I was thinking about this for myself. I feel like for all the talk that we have about films that are very the same and formula and whatever, I feel like a lot of people are doing kind of more different kinds of things,
Yeah.
at least in a sort of light or mild way. And I really appreciate that. And like if you'd asked me, did I want to see Ayushmann Khurrana play against type? I would have said, sure, but like it wasn't high on my list. But now that I've seen an action hero and he is actively a very different person in that than we think of him as being, like, I was so glad to see it. So
yeah,
there must be some other people, but no one's coming to mind for me.
No one's really coming to mind for me, and this doesn't really answer your question, but I just really want to see a lot more of Vijay Varma because I think he's just so gifted.
Yeah.
I was just so taken aback by him in Darlings. I thought he was absolutely amazing. So
Yeah.
I wanted, and again, he's like what, 2 films old, so he doesn't have a type. But I hope he just keeps experimenting. I hope he gets really meaty. That guy is talented. And I just really want to see him do everything he can possibly do. Like do everything, do a rom-com, do a thriller, do all sorts of things, do a comedy.
This is making me think how really the most important people to get to go against type are actually producers, because they're the ones who make all these projects possible, right? So like Amrita, a friend from Khandan podcast, and here also we have talked many times about how we would love Dibakar Banerjee to do a rom-com. We think he'd make a great rom-com with grown-ups in it, preferably Shah Rukh. But someone's got to fund that. Now, obviously, he has that Yash Raj deal, so maybe that could actually happen. But we need the money to be willing to go against type for any of this to happen, unfortunately. So all of our producers who listen to this, diversify.
All the very many producers.
Diversify your assets.
I just somehow this just sprang into my brain, but I just thought of someone who did play against type, but I don't think it went over very well. But I give her props for trying. Was Katrina Rajneeti.
Someone on Twitter suggested that. Did she have a type already by that point?
Her only type is being like beautiful and sexy and doing dances. That's her type. That's what she does.
No comment.
Like, was that a rhetorical question, Beth? I was like, what?
But that's fairly early in her career.
No. Well,
yeah, that movie was like 2010. It was a long time ago.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it's certainly looking backwards, it's certainly an anomaly in what she has done.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I can't say she succeeded. Actually, Rajneeti made me a little bit mad because I was like, you could have given this role to someone who can actually act and they would have really pulled it off. And instead you gave it to Katrina Kaif. Okay. But I give her credit for doing it, even though I think it was a misfire. And that's the thing, right? Anytime you give someone a role that's completely against type, or an actor accepts a role that's completely against type, that is always going to be a risk. It's just wonderfully delicious when it works out. But sometimes you're just like, who agreed to this casting? This is terrible.
It's a gamble, right? Which is why people don't want it, producers and others don't want to do it. But that is from where the art comes, I think, ultimately, is some kind of gamble. um,
Okay. Well, this was a really fun discussion. New year, new you. I do not have any New Year's resolutions because I don't believe in them because I think they're silly. Do you have any New Year's
I
resolutions, Beth?
have some goals, and they are things
Okay.
like drink more. I'm holding an empty water glass, drink more water. Because I have a
I'm
desk
glad you
job most of the
specified
time.
water because drink more can mean many
Drink
things.
more water. The other is not a no, it's just not a goal. But really, I do, like, I was serious about the Dharmendra thing, and I'm also very serious about 70s masala, watching more of that, because every time I do, my mood is so improved. I am so delighted. I spend 2.5 or 3 hours just like clapping at the screen. Why am I not doing this every week?
It's like therapy. It's your
Right.
weekly therapy. Yeah.
I
Just make
was
an
reading.
appointment in your own Google Calendar, like Fridays, 7
Yeah,
p.m.
is
therapy. And it's
masala
a
night.
masala movie.
And so if people have 70s masala recommendations for me, like, I've seen the big obvious ones. I've actually seen a lot of the non-obvious ones too. Like, I am going to run out of them at some point. There won't be any more that are accessible to me, but I will watch things without subtitles. I will watch things. I'm not too versed in 70s masala from non-Hindi. So if you've got others you can recommend, but I just, yeah, why don't I spend more time with this thing that I know that I love?
Right.
And also read more books. I've been doing really well. I've been reading a lot more books in the last
Okay,
year and a
good.
half or so. So that's a goal. But resolution is it's kind of a word I say for the UN, like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna try. So I resolve to try, I guess. But
Yeah.
I think we need to be flexible with ourselves, because if we know anything from the last several years, it's that life can interrupt your hopes and plans in very strong ways. And just be gentle with yourselves and be flexible, and watch
Yeah.
movies that you love, and also try some things that you don't already know about, and think
Mhm.
about them a little bit. That's what we
Yeah.
should all do.
I think I'm going to try to watch more regional movies this year
Nice.
because the regional movies for me have really been hitting it out of the park, and they've been far more satisfying for me than the Hindi movies have been. And in fact, I'm already like very excited that Ponniyin Selvan 2 is coming out in April. I'm very excited about that.
That's so soon,
Um,
relatively.
I
Like,
know.
oh, we're almost
Like,
halfway
yay,
there.
we don't have to miss an entire year. Amazing. Your friend will finally know what happens at the
Yes.
end. So I'm happy for
Yes.
him. But yeah, I'm definitely going to watch more regional cinema for sure. I
Nice.
shied away from Malayalam cinema so far, but I definitely want to watch more regional stuff.
I mean, speaking
Um,
of films that have kind of tiresomely pedantic supporters, Malayalam
oh,
cinema
really?
is not always, oh God. Maybe
Oh,
it's a Twitter thing. Twitter is going to be a
oh.
place where people are pedantic, I realize.
Yeah.
It's one of those, like, well, I would watch it if you would shut up about it. And that is not all proponents of Malayalam cinema. Let me be clear. We have
Right.
some very dear friends who do not speak that way whatsoever. But there are
Interesting.
people out there.
Oh.
But it's got
Okay.
some of the same baggage as the Ray films, right? Like, this is art, this is realism, and you're like, ugh.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for watching this episode of Filmi Ladies. Thank you for continuing to support us. We will be back next week with another episode. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. When you like, and especially if you comment, it helps us acquire more subscribers, which is great because Beth and I have been planning world domination for a while now. So you can help us in our quest. And if you have any movies that you want us to talk about, then just let us know in the YouTube comments, and then we'll think about watching those. We do listen. Like I said, there's a bunch of people who told me to watch Lal Singh Chadda, and I'm so glad you guys convinced me to watch it because I did very
Oh,
much enjoy. I mean, I cried for 2 hours and 40 minutes, but
very
as you know,
dehydrating.
crying, yes, but crying is one of my hobbies, Beth. So it worked out for me. Films and crying work for me very well. So it was enjoyable for sure.
Crying is one of my hobbies. I want that
It
on a
is. It
shirt. I
really
want that on
is.
a shirt for you.
It just makes me feel good. I enjoy a good cry as much as I enjoy a hearty laugh. I said this once to one of my coworkers. She's new, so she doesn't know me very well. She's only been there for 3 days. And she was like, I heard so much about you. And I was like, good or bad? She was like, all the things. And I was like, interesting. And then we were just chatting. And I said, well, I enjoy crying very much. And then she goes, I do too. And I was like, there you go. We're going to be friends.
Same.
All right. Well, thank you for watching Filmy Ladies. Bye. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.